asked to chair our session today. Today's presenter is Blessmore Nhikiti. I hope I'm saying that correctly. Who's connecting with us online. So Blessmore is a doctoral student based at the University of Münster in Germany. Her research is focused on how grassroots usage of digital tools impacts electoral integrity, user consent, and democratization. She holds a Master's of International Relations and an honors in political science from the University of Zimbabwe. Blessmore, thank you so much for agreeing to present to us today. I think I sent you a message that we have a little bit of a calendar clash today. There's another event at the school as we speak, also on elections, specifically South African elections. So I do apologize for that, but thank you for agreeing to present. I think I've heard about you since, I believe you met Geshi, our colleague Geshi, at IceGov last year in October, and since then I've heard about you on several occasions. So I really look forward to this presentation. It's a topic that I myself I'm very interested in. So yeah, thanks again for agreeing to present, and we look forward to hearing some insights from your research. Please, I'll hand over to you.
Thank you so much. Am I audible enough?
Yes, we hear you loud and clear.
Okay, thank you so much for the introduction. So I don't have anything to add on that, except to confirm that I did meet Gehe in Brazil last year, and I'm looking forward to the IceGov in South Africa. Was really excited that the next IceGov is coming to South Africa. So are we ready to start so that I can start? I have slides already presented. Okay. So as per the previous request, should I still switch off my camera?
Yeah, I think you can just to manage but so far the network is stable. No?
Okay. So my presentation today is based on citizen initiatives for enhancing electoral integrity. So basically, we all understand how important elections are for democratization and how citizens as well as policymakers are trying to improve the quality of elections, because while elections might not be directly an indicator to show that a country has fully democratized, they actually set the basis. They're like the foundation. They set the foundation for democratization. So they are really necessary, and I think it follows logic to say that a government that actually invests in making sure that there is higher standards of electoral integrity in an election, that government will likely democratize, because what's the point of investing in good elections when you know you want to probably or turn the country into an autocracy? So the concern mostly for elections is coming from citizens now, compared to the traditional setup where we had elections being a concern for the political elites, being the electoral management bodies, civil societies, or the government, or the candidates themselves and political parties. Now we see citizens also trying to participate, also trying to initiate parallel initiatives so that they can improve electoral integrity. Yeah. So just a quick one. Can I please have like the camera on your side, because it feels like I'm just talking to myself.
We're still here.
Yeah, okay. It makes me connect with the audience better than just having a black screen. It feels like I'm reciting a poem. Okay, so I prepared slides for the presentation today, which I'll try to be as quick to the point as possible so that the discussion can be open and we can have insights. And yeah, so basically the priority areas that I have, that I have observed in my research and going forward, is that there is a trend of citizens grouping outside of traditional civil society organizations. So this is what I was explaining, that citizens now, instead of grouping with political parties, instead of joining with traditional civil society organizations, they are utilizing artificial intelligence and social networks to mobilize themselves and invent these parallel initiatives, these grassroots initiatives to improve electoral integrity or to monitor elections. But this is the first observation, the general observation that is there within the democratic spectrum. We have even in let's say here in Germany, they have the Wahl-O-Mat. This is a voting advice app. So if you're a citizen, you get into that, you use that application, then you enter your priority areas as you go. You answer a survey, but as you go, you're picking priority areas to say, for me, education is important. And then you keep specifying your preferences as you go. Then the voting advice app will say, okay, this the candidate who is representing this could be this or this or this. It's not telling you who to vote for, but it's showing you different party manifestos and what you most likely aligned to. So these are citizen initiatives that are coming directly from citizens or from academia or from experts in the field of electoral integrity. But however, while we are having these initiatives, these different initiatives, we also have a pattern that is developing. We have fake news and we have disinformation and even hate speech during and after elections. It has skyrocketed in the last decade compared to probably in the early 2000s when the internet was not spread across as it is right now, because you understand that people have tend to become social media vigilantes or keyboard warriors. So you realize that some of the things that I can't say as a person in the street, because you have met me in person, I am free to say it on the internet because I could be anonymous, or I could just create a ghost account and use VPN, so you can't really track me. So I get to say anything that I want online. But in the process of doing that, in that freedom that we have to communicate, to connect, and to deliberate, there is also the cost of fake news, misinformation, and disinformation during and after elections, which is a cause of concern in different elections, despite the level of democracy, whether you're a fragile democracy or you are an old established democracy. I can give examples of, let's see what happened to America during the 2020 elections. We can compare with being an old democracy, America being an old democracy. Then we come closer to home. We go to Zimbabwe. It's a fragile democracy. We also have the same situation. We go to Brazil. It's a developing democracy. We have the same situation with Bolsonaro. So these are trends that are evolving over time. There's so many examples that can be laid that collaborate that this is actually a pattern and this is actually a trend that is developing. So the third priority area that I have observed over time is there is a notable rise in supporters of losing contestants engaging in post-election violence and alleging electoral fraud. So in my paper that I presented in IceGov, I talked about how political elites or the actual contestants that are participating in an election can use social media to misinform or to disinform their supporters, because people tend to idolize to idolize political candidates. Like if you have an idol, you're most likely to admire them or to follow their narratives or their line of thinking. This is the same thing that I was arguing, showing that in the 2018 elections in Zimbabwe, we found that people who supported Chamisa, the losing candidate, the second runner, who alleged that the elections were cheated and the elections were rigged, most of them, they just believed the narrative because Chamisa had said it. we find that in the first instance, in the first 2 weeks after the election, on Facebook, the analysis that I did with the Facebook post and the comments, 90% of the people confirmed that the election was cheated, and they supported Chamisa's narrative without even questioning it, without referring to anything. It was just, yes, my president, I support you. Elections were cheated. Let's find a way to deal with this. But as time went on, and then a court case happened where they went to the Supreme Court to challenge the elections. And then the Supreme Court case was aired on national television. And also different other organizations were now offering counterfacts to try and balance the vacuum that had been created by fake news. So most people, I saw that most people were starting to move from being conformists, from outrightly supporting the narrative of their political leader, to questioning and even engaging in more deliberation within the comment section. The supporters themselves, they were engaging and they were deliberating, like questioning, like, okay, you said the elections were cheated, but where is the proof? You need to produce the proof. And the number of people who just gave positive endorsements increased significantly with the introduction of facts. But now the problem that we tend to have in the continent or in other developing democracies is that conspiracies tend to occupy a larger part of the environment of the information ecosystem, because we tend to believe that the government or the political elites have uh, they have a different agenda from everyone else. So anyone who brings in an ideology that confirms these theories, we tend to not focus on questioning or going back to statistics and science. We don't like focusing on science or focusing on the numbers. We just believe what people have said, or we just believe the narrative that is being said by someone who has a higher standing in society. So this is what I have observed. Then these are my priority areas. I will move on to the next slide. So in this presentation where I'm talking about who audits the auditor. So we say the auditor now, they are the citizens. So, but who is being audited? The citizens are creating these parallel initiatives used to audit electoral management bodies. For example, in this case, South Africa is having an election. So I gave an example of the Electoral Commission of South Africa. If there is mistrust in the Electoral Commission, they would likely be citizens, or there would be likely auditors coming in to audit the credibility and the validity of the electoral management body. And then there is also political candidates and political parties as well. These are important stakeholders in the election, because they are pushing to get the next term of office. So sometimes it's important to observe what they're doing, because they could also be a source of misinformation. They could also be a source of they could also be a source of the confusion that we have within the electoral system. So these are the major parties that are being audited. But this leaves the vacuum of, now we have the auditors. Who is auditing the auditors? Yes, because the auditors now, we have the civil society organizations. We have the civil society organizations. We can hold them accountable because probably they have registered with different bodies to say, okay, we are a civil society and we concentrate on this and this and this. If these people push forward false narratives within an election, we can hold them accountable because we know where to find them. They have a board of directors, they have a budget, they have somewhere that they're operating from, they have a base of operations. Then we also have international organizations. It's the same thing with the civil societies. Then we have academia and researchers and experts. If I write something that is not factual, people can corroborate it, and people can ask questions, and people know where to find me. And there's no way you can anonymize yourself while you're publishing. I know there is another way, but I don't really know. But the big issue we have is the citizen organizations, the ones that are emerging online, the ones that are starting their initiatives online, and they are saying, okay, well, we are interested in monitoring this election, or we are interested in improving the standard of electoral integrity within this election, but we don't have a base of operations. They probably have a website that they can remove with after 2 weeks, or it is run by anonymous people that we don't know about. Right now, there is a trend of ghost accounts that are being created, especially on Facebook. So we don't really know who is behind each account, but they still contributing a lot into the narrative, or into the electoral cycle, because they get to disseminate information at different levels. And because of applications, social media platforms like WhatsApp, or like Twitter, like Facebook, where you can forward information, whether it's verified or not, information can be forwarded. There is an example that I can give about people who actually chain messages that can be sent on WhatsApp that would be saying, oh, you should like this picture, otherwise if you don't send it to 10 people, you have 10 years of bad luck. There are people who genuinely forward this, believing that they will have 10 years of bad luck, and because they don't have the cognitive engagement to understand what they are to understand what they are forwarding, they just believe what they see on the internet. So this is the biggest problem that we have right now, with social media, artificial intelligence, and elections. I think it is important to focus on that, so that we can't say this will provide an answer within the next elections, but at least we try to solve the dilemma of having a generation that actually believes information that is circulated via social networks, and a generation that believes in facts, that believes in cross-referencing before taking in a narrative. So yeah, then we move to the next slide. So here I was just citing examples of some of the initiatives that are being put through to improve electoral integrity. So we have parallel vote tabulation. We have the CSOs, the civil society organizations. There is parallel vote tabulation. I will just explain a bit. In any case, there's someone who doesn't know what parallel vote tabulation is. So normally what these organizations do. So for instance, in Zimbabwe, it is done by the Zimbabwe Electoral Support Network. And in Ghana, it is done by the Coalition of Democratic Election Monitors. And in Zambia, it's done by Christian Church, I've forgotten the actual name, but it's CCMG. So what they do is they have a sample of selected polling stations. From this sample of selected polling stations, it is representative of the entire population. They actually use statistics and mathematical formulas to calculate this. So they create this representative sample, and they say, okay, if we are selecting 750 polling stations, these 750 polling stations, the results that we're going to get from these polling stations will show how the results will be distributed across. This method has been used in several countries. I just had to put 3 because otherwise it would have been plenty of examples. It's used across Africa, Asia, and some instances in the Middle East as well. Yeah, they're using it to corroborate elections. So this is what most civil societies are engaging into. Then we have crowdsourcing election monitoring. This is an initiative where where civil societies that are engaging in this, they dedicate a certain level. They actually empower citizens cell phones and with other different digital tools to monitor the election. How they do it is, if I am walking in the streets and I see that the people removing campaigning material from another candidate, from an opposition candidate, I can film this and immediately send it to the initiators, or upload it in, mostly they use the Ushahidi platform. Let's say in Kenya they use the Ushahidi platform, then upload it to Ushahidi. So the people running this crowdsourcing election monitoring initiative can simply can easily see this in near real time, and then they respond, or they respond quickly. So it's a way of saying citizens are on the ground during election time. They are the ones who are likely to witness if someone is engaging in electoral malpractices, if someone is vote buying, if someone is engaging in violence or intimidation, they can easily report this instantly, and then there will be a response. So this method has been used in different countries. So in so many countries. So an example would be in Kenya. Then we have the Coalition on Election Monitoring and Observation in Tanzania. Then we have the Election Watch for East Africa, which has Uganda, Kenya, and Tanzania. They used also this initiative in their elections. So other examples that I have here include Indonesia, Turkey, and Nigeria. So it's really it's a popular method, but it's mostly done by civil society organizations, because it needs a lot of infrastructure, a lot of coordination, and it needs a lot of education. So most is civil societies that engage in this. Then we move to in international observer missions. So with this, we know in each election there are observer missions that would come to observe elections. I have examples cited there. Then we move to the discussion, like where we're talking about citizens reporters, where we're saying citizens are engaging in election monitoring as well. Citizens are also engaging in enhancing electoral integrity. The examples I've given them earlier, like the smart vote or Wahl-O-Mat in Germany, and then societly.com or votersmart.org in the United States of America. These are also examples. Then I also have the citizen initiated election monitoring, where I was describing citizens as the one initiating on different social media platforms. So the case study that I have here is from the Zimbabwe 2023 election, the elections that happened last year. In this election, there was an AI that was developed by a bunch of citizens, which was termed Mandla. So this AI, they developed it because they wanted to get they wanted to monitor the election results and compute them. It was similar. The idea was similar to parallel vote tabulation, but unlike parallel vote tabulation, they were going to compile. They were going to get election results from the polling station immediately after the results are announced and published. Then the agents would, or anyone would, just take a photo and collect this result, send it into the Mandla database. Then it would be computed in near real time to show which candidate between the presidential candidates, to show the exact result that was there. But with this initiative being described on paper, we will be like, yes, this is a good initiative, because then citizens will know who is winning and who is not winning, and there will be additional material on the site that can be used to corroborate vote rigging narratives or allegations of voter fraud. But then the initiators, what they had in mind is they were pushing the narrative that elections are cheated, and with elections being cheated, this application will prove that elections are being cheated, or at least, the very least, it will show that the opposition party will win the election. Another party other than ZANU-PF will win the election, which already in its own is giving a partisan agenda to the initiative, which would have properly worked for everyone. So the application was widely deliberated on different social networks, Facebook, WhatsApp, and a bit of Instagram, but it was mostly deliberated on Twitter. So this is where I went in to Twitter, and then I collected. It even turned into a hashtag. So people were using the hashtag Mandla on Twitter. So during the election, I went into the let me get into the next slide so that I can, yeah. So during the election, I went and collected tweets from the 16th all the way to the 30th, because the election was on the 23rd. It went from the 23rd and the 24th. So I collected tweets during this time frame, because the application was only made public from the 16th, and I assessed from these tweets that included the hashtag Manla, how were people perceiving this application? Were people trying to see if this application will bring valid results, or were people using this application also following a certain partisan narrative or a partisan agenda? So how I distributed my categorization of the tweets, I made a subgroup of conformists. These are tweets that strongly believe in electoral fraud and Mandla's unequivocal ability to review the rigging tactics. So these people were confirming the narrative from the initiators that Mandla will expose the political elites and will expose the ruling party, will expose their rigging tactics. Then the second category were those that said Mandla's results would show ZANU-PF or CC win without favoritism. People who believe that whether it's ZANU-PF or Triple C that is going to win, Mandla would be unbiased. It will show the actual results. Then we have the third category being those who were rejecting. These ones, they rejected Mandla's capability to provide tangible results and CC's overall victory in the election. So they were like, yeah, CC, they were the opposite of the conformist category. Then we have the inadequately informed group, which had insufficient knowledge about the initiative. So from these, this is the categorization that I made after I collected about 396 tweets. So at first they were almost thousands and thousands of tweets, but I had to narrow it down to include the hashtag Mandla, so that we see people who were really engaging with this hashtag, or who the argument that I had is, if someone is adding this hashtag, they have enough cognitive engagement to understand what Mandla is. So I went in and did this categorization. So here is what I found out from studying this. At the beginning of on the 16th, when this application was launched, we see that there is a lower amount of people engaging conformist. The red line would show the conformist. There's a lower. It's still higher, but it's minimal. And as we go, it falls down as the discussion is falling, but it increases as we get to the election, all the way up until the 27th. So people were genuinely believing in these discussions. People were genuinely believing that Mandla will expose ZANU-PF, nothing more, nothing less. So the mentality was that ZANU-PF is going, Triple C is going to win the election. Nothing more, nothing less. And Mandla's job is to expose. If Triple C does not win the election, Mandla's job will be to expose that ZANU-PF cheated on the election. But this alone is causing instability in the election, because if we have a higher amount of people who are genuinely believing this, if then the election shows that their favorite party or did not win the election, then we are going to have a problem. That's where we have people going in the street and starting to protest. Let's go back to the example of what happened in the US. We have people who genuinely believe that Trump was going to win the election, but when this did not happen, when Trump did not win the election, they were ready to go and attack because they were convinced that this election was done and dusted before it even happened. So how now this is what inspired me to look at, okay, how do people get to these do people get to be these diehard fans? I would say it's initiatives like this that give people false hope or assurance that, you know what, this is going to happen. This application will simply show that the election is going to be won. Then the second category were the unbiased, which were the kind of like the lowest. It only increased. It never reached more than 10%, more than 10% of the posts. Then everything else, the rejecting, the uninformed, everything else was very low. It was only mostly 80% of the people engaging with this tweet were arguing that the elections were conformist, and they were confirming the narrative that Mandla would show that elections were rigged, or Mandla would show that Triple C would win. Then I also went in further to look at people who actually tweeted two or more times, to see them where the discussion went. So the inside column shows the number of people who tweeted two or more times. So that's we have the conformists with 47, and then somewhere off topic, somewhere not enough. Some did not know, some had unbiased views, some were rejecting. But we see that for those who tweeted, who were conformist at the beginning, their first tweet was confirming this narrative. We find that 30 remained conformist after the election. That this period was after the election, 2 days after the election. We see that at least 30 people remained conformist. Then from this, 7 people went to I don't know. They moved from being conformist to I don't know. Then they were somewhere not enough context, and some even tweeted off-topic things, and some rejected. Some went to they changed their opinions to join the rejecting category, and some were unbiased. The same is with those who had initially tweeted off-topic. They some moved to become conformist. 9 of them moved to become conformist. 8 of them went off topic, and 2 of them they went to they didn't know. They didn't know what Mandla was talking about, and they didn't have an idea. So the same is seen with not enough. You see that from all these categories, most of the people were moving to becoming conformist, which is problematic to think, okay, the election has happened, there are facts. There are other organizations who are also corroborating that the election results. I'm not arguing that the election was free and fair, but I'm talking about, because the electoral cycle is big, it has 11 stages, but I'm talking about the results. And you can say the election, I want to make it clear that the election can be cheated before even the voting period. People can cheat in the voter registration. They can cheat even in campaign finance. They can cheat during the campaign period. But what I'm looking on is the results, because from all the conflicts that I have seen so far, or that I have had, that I have studied, I've seen that no one went out to demonstrate because campaign finance was not fair in the post-election. People demonstrate because of the results. So I only looked at the results, and this discussion only is centered on the accuracy of the results. So what I would then come back to say is, when we make okay. So yes, when we have these initiatives happen in elections, when we have citizens engaging, which is what liberal democracy demands, that we have citizen engagement at any level, we should also pay attention at what kind of engagement are we giving out? Because if then the citizens are not educated enough to understand the repercussions that may come, or the consequences of peddling false information and false narratives, we will get to a generation where in each and every election we will have post-election violence. Even in the most stable democracies, we will have post-election violence because of initiatives like this that are unregulated, or at the very least uninformed citizens. Because what I think is also important is most people within within our context, as the African context, yes, we have a higher literacy rate, we have they can read and they can write, but can they comprehend the information that they are receiving? Reading and writing is one thing, but understanding is also another thing. So I think moving forward, we should have we should invest in education, on digital literacy education, on how to engage online, even include it in the curriculum as early as the first grade, so that we have at least the future generations can understand the importance of facts, the importance of engaging sustainably, and the importance of curtailing disinformation and fake news. So I hope I didn't, yeah, the time is also, we have a time constraint here, but I would love to go on and on. So I will conclude my presentation here and open the platform for discussion, so that we can get different ideas and get different perspectives, and I can also get to clarify where I wasn't clear enough. Thank you so much for the time. I will hand over to you, the coordinator.
Thank you very much, Blessmore, for your presentation. Yeah, we have about 15-20 minutes for questions and comments. So those online, you can raise your hand, and that counts for people in the room as well. Perhaps while people are still digesting your presentation, maybe I can abuse my privileges as chair and ask the first question. No, thanks for the presentation. So I get why you believe it's a potential problem, but I'm just wondering whether your starting assumption is perhaps incorrect, because you are almost like accepting it's a premise of your analysis that that Mandla is a kind of like objective, neutral, independent, supposedly it portrays to be this kind of like independent platform for monitoring and reporting results. But I was just, while you were talking, I was just Googling around, and I can see that it was actually, when it was developed, it was developed specifically to, and this is a quote from an article I found here, to allow opposition Citizens Coalition for Change, CCC, supporters to check their correct polling station. So it kind of like targets opposition voters already. So the first thing is, obviously that's going to bias your sample heavy, and that could probably explain why you have this sort of extreme spike of people who distrust the Electoral Commission. But at the same time, I wonder, like, doesn't that sort of undermine your starting assumption? Because it means it's kind of like just almost like a communication vehicle for the opposition. So we shouldn't even treat it as anything else. It's a way for opposition politicians and activists to communicate and mobilize their supporters in a way that might be different from the traditional civil society way of electoral integrity, monitoring, etc. But if you look at it historically, it's not that different. I mean, historically, newspapers were funded by political parties, and newspapers were used by political parties also to communicate messages, organize their supporters, etc. So if you start looking at it from that perspective of it is a partisan platform, the purpose is not to objectively report on the election or ensure electoral integrity. It might portray to be that because that's kind of the narrative of a liberal democratic way of seeing elections. But in actual fact, it is just a vehicle for communication and mobilization, the same way that newspapers have been until actually relatively recently, historically. So it's a little bit abstract, but I'm just kind of like trying to challenge you a little bit on your starting assumptions.
Yeah, thank you so much. That's a good question. And I actually forgot to mention this in the beginning. So how this happened is when Mandla started, it was presented as this big idea of election monitoring, right? Of how the opposition, because generally in the context of Zimbabwe, there has been ZANU-PF has been in the political has been in the presidentship for almost since 1980. Yeah. So when this Mandla application was first introduced, it was introduced as an initiative that would help to show that the election was rigged, and to show that the other parties, the CCC, would win the election. So it was an election monitoring initiative that was firstly presented as a very like an initiative that would show tangible or credible results, valid results. But as time went on, because of the controversies that happened online, the direction of things that happened, I think within like 2 or 3 days, the leaders changed their narrative, and then they were like, okay, this application is to help CCC or CCC supporters to actually confirm or corroborate the election results. So it would resemble an echo chamber, but it wasn't an echo chamber, because in the actual wording of in the actual twist that we find different I find different what's this called? I find different messages, yes, from ZANU-PF, from other parties, and even from the people that are deliberating with it. So while it was, it had ended up having a partisan orientation, my argument would be, yes, of course, it is a partisan orientation. In 2018, we also had CCC, we had also had Chamisa's supporters going out in the streets and demonstrating because they believed that elections were not free, or elections were rigged, but they failed to produce sufficient evidence to point to this to back up their arguments, which ended up becoming disastrous, which ended up dragging for long and having court cases and whatnot. A lot of things happened in there. So in the 2023 election, we have again an initiative to monitor elections. This is where I think it is important, because this initiative is said to monitor elections, and it is also said to produce valid intangible results. So in the end, are people going to believe election results that are coming from from other authentic sources other than the Electoral Commission itself, from other authentic sources, or they are going to stick with the argument that, okay, elections were rigged, elections were cheated because Mandla said so? This is where I also incorporate the idea of partisanship initiatives also coming into play, and fueling the post-electoral, like they are like gaslighting or pushing the narrative towards post-electoral instability. Have I answered the question?
Yeah, no, thank you so much for that. I can see we have a hand online, and I think it is Colin, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, it is. Good day, colleagues. Lovely to hear your voices, and thank you so much for a delightful and interesting presentation. I just want to chat a little bit about, firstly, thank you for reminding us about Ushahidi. I remember, and of course, we all would know that Ushahidi was a responsive piece of software to a 2G kind of nefarious spread of information. People used SMSs back then to end that, and then end result was 1 million people lost their homes and 2,000 people tragically passed away. But Ushahidi grew from that, didn't it? It became it is now a well-known disaster recovery mechanism that is deployed in multiple countries across the world. So sometimes, when things happen in Africa, there are things that we need to celebrate and talk about it much more. So thank you for raising that bit about Ushahidi. My second point here is I want you to look up this word. It's called the notion of this term called the disinformation dozen. One of the things that are happening in unstructured social media analytics that is going on is that we are now beginning to realize that by studying the influences in a particular campaign, #Mandla or whatever, could be #Fees Must Fall or #COVID. And if you start looking at the most prominent of the influences in the narrative, you might find that the top 10 or the top dozen people are the people that are influencing the narrative in a particular direction. So it's a very interesting one. In South Africa, for instance, the KZN riots that occurred in 2021, where there was a very, very strong correlation between the top 12 influences. And internationally, for COVID, the top 12 disinformation influences were identified, and the pattern seems to be emerging. So I'd urge you to look at your Mandla data set from that point of view. And finally, parallel voter tabulation. You're talking about who audits the auditors, and the other one will be the fox guarding the chicken and things like that. In an area of total distrust. I mean, nobody trusts anyone on counting day, right? It's only the winner that is magnanimous and says, "Thank you very much. I support the election results." So in the even PVT, with the notion of an independent observer doing it, one man's freedom fighter is another man's gorilla. So even the observers come with a certain, sadly, certain degree of baggage that can be manufactured, that can be alluded to, that can compromise the results. So although it is a good intention, the pathway to hell is always paved with good intention. I want to propose to you that we'll look at blockchain as an area, because everybody at the counting station does not trust each other. Therefore, every person is a key agent in the results that is computed at a vote counting station. And if we use blockchain, every person in that link would be instantly aware if the result is changed in any way. And I'm suggesting that blockchain may be a way of restoring some degree of credibility that is independent of people, but dependent on every single player in the link at every voting booth. What do you think of that? Thank you.
Thank you so much for your contribution and your questions. So in terms of blockchain, I understand that blockchain is mostly used in India. It was used in Indian elections. This is a decision that citizens cannot make. As I indicated earlier, I'm looking at the auditors, the citizens themselves, or initiating parallel initiative, putting in parallel initiatives to as checks and balances to the electoral management bodies, political candidates and political parties. But for the decision of blockchain now, this is a decision that comes mostly from the governments and from the electoral management bodies, whether they want to adopt this kind of technology or not. So that is also a bit challenging for the case studies that we would be looking at, because if it is not being used in these countries, then there is no basis for analysis in this aspect. But after I looked at blockchain as well, I think what you're saying is right. It is a revolutionary idea that most countries or electoral management bodies should embrace, because it solves a lot of problems, especially in the counting of ballots. I hope I've answered your question.
Yes, thank you very much. I actually have a PhD student working on that topic right now, so thank you for that feedback.
Okay.
There you go, basis for future collaboration. I can see there's a couple of questions online. So Maxwell is asking, How did the Mandla app perform in remote areas in Zimbabwe? There are allegations of inflated results figures favoring ZANU-PF, where opposition parties could not deploy polling agents. So let's take that first.
Sorry, can you repeat again? I didn't quite
hear
it.
So it's a question in the chat. So if you open the chat, you can also read it. But I'll just read it again. How did the Mandla app perform in remote areas in Zimbabwe? There are allegations of inflated results figures favoring ZANU-PF, where opposition parties could not deploy polling agents.
Okay, so yeah, I can now go into the chat and see it. So, this is where I have why I have said that the problem that we're facing, is that people make allegations and they do not substantiate these allegations. For instance, we have that there are allegations of inflated result figures favoring ZANU-PF, where opposition parties could not deploy polling agents. So how the polling agents work is they have like people that are selected to work as from the public servants to work in the electoral process. These people are mostly not elected based on their party affiliations or anything. They're just random people in the civil service that are selected. I remember there was a time when I was still in uni and I was doing relief teaching. This was within 2018 elections. There wasn't any election. There wasn't any political affiliation used to select party agents or people who were going to work for the electoral management body. It was just a copy of names that would be presented, and each individual person would be selected. So the that alone, the fact that there weren't any any opposition agents that were deployed there, I don't think it really undermines the integrity of an election, because when the V11 form is released, there are people who are supposed to sign for the V11 form, and their signatures, they sign this in front of everyone, and the results actually move from one place to the other, So I don't think that would be, it could have happened, but I don't think that would actually be a bigger problem that would be said to have caused the opposition to lose the election. So the problem is with with allegations like this, they are posted online, and then people start deliberating on them and saying, oh yeah, so there has been reports that in rural areas so and so happened, so such things happened, and before you know it, it's now a narrative that is being pushed online. But in actual fact, this narrative is not substantiated. People are not taking time to understand how the procedures and how the processes work. I'm not sure if this answers the question.
I think it does. Let's take one. I can see there's one last question online. Maybe we can just take that before we wrap up. Blessmore, I don't know if you can see it yourself, but I can read it out.
I'm actually trying to read it.
Okay, thanks for the presentation you just heard. My question is, why use the concept of auditing? Is it appropriate and accurate in respect of what these initiatives are attempting to do, especially in light of the relevant question we just heard regarding potential bias in the use of Mandla app, of the Mandla app initiative? And this is from Dr. Tabo.
Good question. So why I called it auditing is just because we have the electoral management body and political elites and political parties, yeah, and their duty is to produce their duty is to produce tangible election results and credible election results. But then we have these parallel bodies, whether it's researchers, whether it's experts, or whether it's the citizens themselves. They are coming in to see whether the job has been done accurately, whether the results that have been presented or whether the results that have been released are an exact corroboration of the parallel figures that they have. So in a way, it's kind of auditing is that if that's has the first question had been answered about why I called it auditing in this sense. Then the next part was
yeah, I think that's more. We've inspired a conversation between Tavo and Colin, and I think we need to pick up that conversation at a later stage, and we might have to pull in. I know, Colin, we're abusing you for many things, but we might have to abuse you a little bit more because it's an interesting conversation. But I'm afraid we'll have to wrap up. Blessmore, thank you so much again for presenting your research, and yeah, it was nice to finally put also a face to the name that we've heard about for the last 6 months or so. I don't think we have any urgent updates, and we're also running over time. Maybe just to say that the next Tairisha Lunchbox event will be on the Thursday, the 6th of June. And I think Zibo will probably communicate shortly with, I'm not sure who the speaker is, but you'll all receive information shortly. So thanks again, especially to Blessmore, but also to everyone who connected online and were here with us in the room. All the best, and we'll be in touch soon.
Thank you so much, colleagues. Cheers.
thank you so much for the time.